going to try and weave different concepts together again today, which I like to do sometimes. So this morning, what came out of a client conversation is this topic of the ego versus the soul. And the ego in the spiritual community gets a pretty bad rap. There's oh, ego is terrible, it's bad. You gotta, get rid of your ego to be spiritually enlightened and all of these things. And my view on it is we need to have an ego in order to have a personality. I think the universe perfectly, creator, source, God, whatever you want to call it, perfectly designs us to be the way that we're meant to be, because all of it is like tools for our evolutionary growth. So it is without fault, right? It's not coincidence that we have an ego. So my perspective tends to be one that leans more towards, well, how do I utilize this? How do I use this in the best way, rather than vilify it and try and get rid of it? And so a lot of I've spoken in the past about kind of this relationship, this proper relationship and union between the human self and the soul self. And so you could say going into the ego is looking at it a little bit more specifically. So I want to look at today just kind of when we're going into our ego self and when we're going into our soul self and how to really work with the ego. But what I want to tie into this as well is I feel like we're being really called to come into present moment living. We're really shifting paradigms. I mean, I think we don't even know what we're going through as a collective and as a consciousness right now. It's immense. It's really immense. And a lot of people are feeling like everything from bliss to just despair. I have gone literally from despair to bliss within a period of 12 to 24 hours. Maybe I'll get to that story today. But so we're undergoing mass transformation right now. And so part of it is unlearning centuries of conditioning and indoctrination around how to approach life, like how to do life. And so I want to look at it, from this kind of spiritual perspective, but also just how do we work with this? How do we come into a very different paradigm of present moment living, not getting too attached to the future or the past, and also understanding how to be in partnership with our ego, because it's there for a reason. So let's dive in and see where it takes us. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So I'm noticing this kind of theme, especially within myself and my experience that I've been going through on this journey of finding a new home and traveling a lot. But I'm noticing this even with certain friends and with clients that I can really see, feel, and observe this shift of real present moment. And if you've been following, you've heard me kind of really talking this year. Like, I think my theme, my word of the year has been radical trust. Radical trust, which is actually coming into radical faith. And I had a beautiful little just text message from a friend of mine that I haven't heard from or spoken to in a while. And she said something along the lines of, I'm really grateful for the moments when I let go and have faith and the miracles that come in when I do. And I had just had this experience a week ago. Is, what happens when we let go of trying to control everything, which this ties into ego. And what happens when I have radical trust, come into the unknown present moment. Well, the present moment is here. So in a way you could say it's known, but the next present moment is unknown, right? But what happens when I can come into that and let go and have radical trust and radical faith? There is something that really happens that is miraculous that comes through. It's really amazing. So I'm gonna just share the story now. I'm gonna try and do it as succinctly as possible. Last Sunday, I had woken up with a lot of anxiety because I knew that the following Saturday I needed to move out, and I couldn't find a place to live. And I had been, this is ironic to say it this way, oxymoron. I had been trying to find a place, but I was trying to not try. Because one thing that I've observed so much with my clients is I can see them trying really hard. They're trying really hard to be spiritual. They're trying really hard to grow. They're trying really hard to manifest. They're just trying. And often from the outside in, I can see it very clearly. And I think, oh, you don't need to try so hard. Stop trying so hard. Easier said than done. But again, this is an unlearning. We're unlearning so many old ways of being that are just, it's like shedding an old skin. It's just not working anymore, especially as we're evolving and, our consciousness is evolving and unfolding and we're growing. We're kind of graduating to the next step if we so choose to. So the old ways of being are just not going to work anymore. And I think sometimes life puts us in a position so that we just cannot, we cannot do it the old way. If you do it the old way, you're going to run into a wall. So I was trying out this not trying, let's just see what happens if I have radical trust and radical faith and I don't try. And certain opportunities were coming in, but they weren't feeling exactly right. And one thing is as we start to move out of living primarily in a left brain, frontal cortex, rational, logical, linear way of being, kind of overly masculine, but in not the most divine forms of the masculine. And we're opening ourselves up into this whole other part of our brain, which is more expansive, feminine, intuitive, the unknown, comfortable with the unknown. We're going to feel things more. And out of that, we're going to have a greater sense of intuition. Now, on a side note, I have a lot of clients that say, Corinne, I don't have any intuition. We all have intuition, where it is a part of the blueprint of who we are. The issue is not that we don't have intuition. The issue is that many people are living lifestyles where they can't even hear it because there's so much interference. So if you live in a city and there's constant noise around you, you're living with millions of people around you, and so there's an overlapping of energy. There's just no even boundary between what's yours and what somebody else's. If you're living in a place where your feet never touch the ground, the earth, the sea, you're not around trees, it's going to be much harder to hear your intuition. Not because it's not there, but it's just there's so much interference. And so if you're living in that kind of environment, it takes more effort to create the space to connect into it. That's why if you're in nature, it's just easier because you're naturally going to flow more into that theta brainwave and be able to connect to your intuition. But I think we need to get out of these false belief systems that it's I'm not intuitive, I'm not psychic, somebody else is. We all have those abilities. We all have incredible abilities. It's actually insane. If we knew all of our abilities, we'd be like, wow, we're miraculous beings. That we've been living in an environment that isn't conducive and hasn't supported us in being in connection to who we truly are. Who we truly, truly are. So sometimes I feel like right now, because things are changing at such rapid speed, it's almost like we're being lovingly forced into this position of let go of the old way of doing it. And I thought I was letting go of it. I thought I'm going to try this game of not trying so hard. And I was feeling into things and I was listening to that. I was like, oh, this doesn't quite feel right. But what happened is that I woke up on last Sunday morning and I felt so much anxiety around where am I going to move to? And I'm so tired of needing to do this every single month. Every single month. In the beginning of this whole journey, it was every week. And I tell you, it was really stressing me out, because your basic instinct, your basic need for survival and for home is being triggered every single week or every single month. So I had a meltdown. I spent a morning really trying, going onto every site and trying to find a place, and nothing was working out, or it wasn't available, or it was triple the cost because it was all of a sudden a holiday vacation rental and not, the kind of off-season, longer-term price. And so I started to cry. I started to really cry, and I started to get really angry. I was really angry at the universe, at source, at creator, at God, whatever you want to call it. And I was just like, F you. F you. I have really put myself out on the limb. I have taken a massive leap of faith. I've taken the bold action, which I know as a human being, that's my job. That's my part of this. I was like, what about you? What about your half? Like, I've done all of this and like, you've dropped me. You've dropped me. Where are you? And I felt so abandoned by life. And I felt so let down. And I really cried from a state of just utter despair. Like, I give up. I give up. And I did go through my phase of like being angry at it. And like, I don't even want to be here. I want to go home. I want to go to my spiritual home. I don't even want to do this anymore. You know, like, I don't have faith. I'm just going to become an atheist. You know, and I'm not like, my faith isn't a religious faith, but I've always, since I was little, had a very strong relationship with existence, with the universe, with source, whatever you want to call it. And so I had a moment where I felt really, I was brought to my knees. I went through it emotionally, and I was really brought to my knees in such a state of just defeat and absolute surrender. I was like, I honestly, I don't know what to do next. I don't know what to do next. And where the hell are you? Who's catching me? Like, you're not catching me. And then I had a moment where I looked up the upper left corner of the room. It's almost as if I could sense something. And I just said, help me. And in that moment, everything changed. I all of a sudden had this intuition to go to my Facebook Messenger and into message requests, which I rarely go on to Messenger, and I never go into my message requests. And there were 2 old messages from these women responding to a post that I had written probably weeks ago when I had been looking for a place to live on this island that I was trying to move to twice, which failed, which brought me to the redirect of going to the mainland. And long story short, there was basically a sublet that was available for 3 months. And I was like, oh my God, this is the first, I wouldn't have to move for 3 months. I could just be settled. It was more than I wanted to pay, but I just heard this voice in my head that said, yes, do it. And I felt this immense excitement all of a sudden, like just hugely elated and excited. And, you know, it felt like a big risk. I'm like, really? Am I going to try this again? Am I going to be redirected there? I've come all the way over here after trying there twice and it didn't work. And I was like, really? Is this happening? Can I do this? Can I take the risk of, you know, paying more money than, and I just went into this, like, come from a state of abundance. Don't come from a place of scarcity, but mainly trust, radical freaking trust, like trust that this has fallen onto my lap. I didn't even need to go looking for it. And the looking clearly wasn't getting me anywhere. So long story short, it was quite like it's sometimes anxiety-ridden experience as I was, you know, trying to confirm all of this and, you know, waiting for the response time in between. And, you know, the next morning I woke up and I had the doubt came in, as what happens, the doubt came in and I thought, you know, do you want to do this? Do you want to, all of that, the rational mind comes in, the ego comes in. And I just said, I have to trust the feeling. And the feeling felt so right. And, you know, trusting your excitement, trusting your bliss. You know, I think there's really something to that. Like, you know, follow your bliss, follow when you feel excited, because that's when your soul is really celebrating. And so it's like really saying yes to that. And it doesn't need to be logical or rational, but when the feeling is right, it's really trusting it and saying yes to that. And then it's really allowing for the rest, the radical faith, to know that it's all going to unfold okay. And what this experience, I mean, it was such a crazy kind of 12 to 24 hours, 48 hours in the end, that I went from feeling such utter despair and giving up to complete immense gratitude and so much excitement. So one of the questions that came up for me is, yeah, but why did it have to get so bad before it got better? And this was a question that also came up with this client this morning is, you know, when do we stop doing? When do we stop the doing and we go into that kind of state of flow and trusting? And I said, you know, I'm still learning how to do that because I already had the intention of I'm going to not try. Right? So I was already slowing down that process of doing, trying to make it happen. That's what we've been taught to do, right? You got to work hard. You got to make it happen. You got to, you know, control everything. And if it's not working out, it's your fault. And don't enjoy because then you should feel guilty about enjoying, right? That's what we've been taught. And we're unlearning a lot here. We're really, really unlearning ways of being that just, we're shedding a skin that we don't need anymore. So, why did I have to be brought to my knees? Because I think sometimes we think we've let go of trying and we're still doing it. We're still doing it in unconscious ways. We're still not trusting fully. We're still coming from that kind of instinctual fear and that, I need to do to make it happen. Now, this is a relationship, right, between the human and the soul. And I'll get to the point of the ego more specifically in a moment. But this is a relationship, right? So we're learning how to sometimes really be in our human self and sometimes in our soul self and how they work together. But our human self has really been indoctrinated to think that it has to work really hard at the expense of completely forgetting the soul self that actually has a higher knowing, an inner knowing. And it goes back to, if we're not able to connect to our intuition and into that knowing, then life feels really scary. And it feels like you have to do everything to make it happen and for it to work out well. Otherwise, you're kind of screwed, like you're not going to be held. And the irony is I felt like I wasn't being held by the universe. I was really willing to just not believe in anything anymore. But in that complete, I give up, it was almost like the universe was saying, hooray, now you got out of your own way. Now I can come in and help you. And what it reminds me of is the analogy that I like to use often. I've used it for myself. I've talked about it with clients because I just think it's so apt. I think it works so well. So, when there's a window and you can open one side and the other side is shut, and there's a bee or a wasp climbing the window, and it's going up and up and up, and then it falls down. It goes up and up and up and it falls down because it's like, I can see the world, but why can't I get out? Why can't I get through? Like I can see it right there. And, I would come up with like a piece of paper and, you try to guide them out to like, just look a little bit to your right. And there's the opening, right? There's the opening to the world. And it's like stubborn. And it's like, nope, I'm going to keep on climbing up and getting a little bit mad and frustrated about it. But I'm going to keep on, I'm determined to do it this way. And after a while, it finally gives up. And then you can gently, guide them to go out the window. And then poof, there they go. They're free. They're out in the world. And I really think this is like, we're the bee and the universe is the one that's trying to be like, just look a little peripherally, use your peripheral vision, turn your head a little bit to the right or the left, and there you go, you're free. It's the redirect. And sometimes, we have free will. So whatever you want to call it, your higher self, your guides, God, source, universe, whatever that is, it can't interfere unless we say, help me, or unless we say, I'm making this choice, or there's still an element of free will. We have free will. So sometimes I think if we're not in that kind of process already, where we're in that partnership and harmony between the human self and the soul self, we have, sometimes I think life really does bring us to like, okay, we got to knock you up against a wall so you fall back and you really let go for a moment, just let go. And so I think I really see it like as that. It's like, okay, finally, you're going to give up the struggle so I can help you. That's what I was doing for the bee. And I think that's what the universe, God, source is doing for us. The other thing that I learned is life is never a straight line. It's not a linear trajectory. It's just not. The island that I've ended up now, that I tried twice, not just once, but I tried twice and it didn't work. And so I got redirected, but funnily enough, I've gotten redirected back to the start where I began. And this is where I think, it's so annoying when people use this term when you're in the middle of something. It's the last thing you want to hear, but it really is true. Trust the divine timing, because clearly the timing wasn't right last September, October, November, December. It also wasn't right back in February, March. Now, all of a sudden, the timing is right. Why? I have no idea. But here I am. And so this is really, I think this call as we're going through this evolutionary shift is to really come back into the present moment, to let go of the trying, to let go of the controlling. And it is real radical trust and radical faith. Now, how does this work when we have an ego that wants to know everything, and that is very, very, the ego comes from the part of us that is it's more like the reptilian brain. So it tends to be in more of a fight or flight mode. If it gets triggered, if it's under stress and duress, it will go into fight or flight mode or freeze. And so, the ego can have a bad rap in the spiritual realms because they're like, well, that's not very spiritual. The ego isn't very spiritual. It isn't. Sorry, I'm not trying to be patronizing. I'm trying to be playful with it. But the ego doesn't have a lot of good reputation because it's not spiritual enough. But our ego is necessary for us to have a personality. And so, as I said in the beginning, how do we use this constructively, right? Now, what happens, especially when we're coming from a spiritual perspective and we're illuminating and we're flexing the muscle more of becoming more self-aware, of becoming more conscientious. So we're more aware of our behavior. We're more aware of things are in our environment, of others. We're more aware of cause and effect and reaction and response. It's really easy to get into a judgmental place of when we're aware of something, but we don't like it. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like my ego. I don't like how my ego is being, is reacting in this moment. And firstly, it's always understanding there's always a reason for our behavior. Okay, why is my ego reacting this way? Why is it going into these forms of behavior? Oh, maybe it's stressed. Maybe it's strained. Maybe it's under pressure. Maybe it's unsupported. Maybe it's overwhelmed. Maybe it's overloaded. Maybe it's not being taken care of, right? Maybe my human isn't being taken care of. It's not getting enough sleep. It's not getting enough food. It's not getting emotional support. It's not getting energetic support. Whatever it is, there's always a reason for our behavior. So instead of condemning our ego, it's really looking at, okay, why is it behaving like this? And what is it actually needing? How can I use this constructively? Right? It comes back to the way that I will always look at things is it doesn't help us to fragment and sever. We are making ourselves feel less whole when we do that. Everything that's happening within us deserves to be included, deserves to be seen, acknowledged, loved, embraced. And then, if needed, it can alchemize, it can transform, but never through getting rid of, never through judgment. And judgment is just an indication that there's a part of us that needs our loving attention. There's a part of us that needs our support. So the ego, and I was almost going to label this the ego versus the soul, but that would be what we've been in for a long time now, right? Me against you, this part of me against this other part of me. And actually, I think we're in a time of include and embrace. And then that's what allows for the evolution and growth to take place. That's actually the catalyst for it. So when it comes to our ego, we have to get out of judgment. We have to get out of vilifying. Now, can we observe that maybe certain behaviors are just not useful? Or maybe we go, I don't like that behavior. Is it serving me? No. Is it serving others? No. Okay. What does it need and what can I give it so I can transform it into a behavior and an action that actually is more supportive? But I really believe that whatever arises within us, whether we like it or not, whether we deem it or judge it as positive or negative, all of it is always, it's a messenger. It's trying to get our attention. And if we're not paying attention, it gets louder and more intense and more dramatic. And what people would say more negative. But it's because we didn't listen when it was quieter. So I think part of this kind of really coming into present moment living, undoing so much of the old paradigm around needing to have the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, the linear trajectory, which as per my story of like trying to get to this island, like it was not a linear, like I was laughing going, what a squiggly U-turny kind of way of getting here. It was not a straight line at all. But here I am. And we'll see if this is where I end up. I'm here for the next 3 months. And if I can find permanent home and it feels good, then I will be here. And if not, I know what my fallback will be. And it's all the entire journey getting to this point has all been an experience through which I have learned so much. And an experience which has been also really enjoyable. And the hard times have also been illuminating in many ways. It's teaching me so much. Has it always been enjoyable? Not always. Sometimes it's been intense. It's been really intense, but I really see it as this whole moving into a different paradigm. And even as we're shifting and our consciousness is evolving, it still doesn't mean get rid of your ego. It just means that we're building a very different relationship to it, where we don't have to be in fight or flight survival mode all the time. We're coming out of fear and into love. So how do you actually be more loving with your ego? So that you actually allow your ego to be in its fullest potential. And I sometimes hate those words. What the hell is fullest potential? It can sound a little bit pompous. So maybe a better way of describing that is, how can I perceive it through the eyes of love, and how can I let it be free? And what I mean by how do I let it be free is when we come out of judgment and when we come into the perspective and the knowing of everything is like orchestrated exquisitely and perfectly. Even if it seems imperfect, that is the wild paradox of life. It is beautifully, perfectly imperfect. And in the imperfection is perfection. Life is a paradox. Welcome. That's what I've learned, at least. So it's really we're just trusting the wisdom of how we have been created, the wisdom of the orchestration of our life, the trusting of divine timing, the trusting of divine unionship between our human and our soul, our ego and our oversoul, our higher self. And just getting out of the fear-based thinking, getting out of judgment. And here's the thing. You don't get rid of judgment by saying, I'm not going to judge, or God damn it, I'm judging, and so therefore I'm a terrible bad person, and I'm super unspiritual, and I'm failing. No, even the judgment deserves compassion. Even the judgment deserves love. We got to allow what is and not fight against it. And if we're going into judgment of it, we're fighting against ourselves. And we also have to have the patience that we're learning how to do this differently. This isn't just your stuff. This is ancestral stuff. This is a collective consciousness stuff. We are still being indoctrinated to live through fear. You might not like hearing this, but if you're still listening to the news or reading the news or watching the news, I know some people find it really important to keep up with what's going on politically. And if that's where you are, that's fair. That's totally fine. But my invitation would be, is it inducing fear in you, or is it sparking inspiration? If it's inspiring you, great. If you're watching the news and you're seeing how shit the world is and it inspires you to go make it a better place, fantastic. But if you're following it and it's putting you into fear, into dread, into worry, into despair, into disgust, into the world is a terrible place and humans are awful, then turn it off. Because we are no use to anyone, most especially ourselves, if we are just emitting out more fear, more worry, more, hopelessness. Again, I go back to the universe wants us to be in a state of joy and bliss and gratitude. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to go through hard times. The universe, God, source doesn't judge. Because there's no duality out of space-time continuum, out of this realm. So it doesn't judge. It just, even if you're going through hard times, it just injects more love into that. Right? Everything is allow and accept. Allow, accept, embrace, love. So, goodness. There's so much learning in these times. And I think the simplest way is just, what we're undergoing, which I think a lot of people are feeling it, whether you're conscious of it or not. And there's a lot of being thrown into the present moment where you might not know your next step until the day before. Hopefully a little bit before. I knew at least 5 days before. I was really grateful for that. Day before would have been a little bit too much. But you know what I'm saying? Like, we're really coming into present moment and needing to trust that, and trust that we are being guided, but we've got to get out of our own way. And in order to get out of our own way, we need to stop trying so hard. We need to stop being so, only living from one part of ourselves, only being in the ego or only being in the left brain, and expanding more into the entirety of who we are, both as a human and a personality and as a soul of who we truly, truly are. We're in the marriage of both. We're in the union and relationship and partnership of both, as I've spoken to before. So please don't vilify your ego. And please don't criminalize, that's not the right word. Please don't judge your experience of still, wanting to project into the future and wanting to control or worrying about what's going to happen, or, going into comparison of the past and how that's going to create the same future. All of the invitation is, how do you be more gentle with yourself? How do you be more loving and compassionate and forgiving with yourself? As sometimes you might forget these things. Sometimes you might be battling against yourself. Sometimes you might be the bee hitting your head against the invisible wall. We're still learning how to come into that flow, but as I've shared in a previous episode of the flow doesn't always mean that it's going to be easeful, but the flow is the path of least resistance. It means I'm not resisting what is. But I love this saying, and this is really a shift of perspective too, of what if we were to look at life as not something that's happening to us, but it's happening for us. So I felt in that moment of despair that life was happening to me. I felt like the victim. This is happening to me. I'm not finding a place to live. And so this is happening to me, and it's not good, and I don't like it. And I feel completely dropped, where actually all of that was happening for me so that I would be redirected to be like, yep, maybe you weren't meant to stay in this place over summer. You're meant to go over there. You're meant to turn your head a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left and go in that direction. So everything was actually happening for me. Now, what's really hard about this is in the moment, it's damn hard to see it. It's really hard to see it and trust it. After the fact, it's like that saying, life is lived forward but understood backwards. I really love that. After the fact, I'm like, oh, right, yeah, makes total sense. But in the moment, it's scary because that, more reptilian part of us, the fight or flight, the ego center gets triggered and we get scared. So we're crossing the bridge, my friends. We're crossing the bridge into a very different state of being. We're learning how to do it as we go along. We're building a very new way. We're creating a very new way of being that isn't known to us yet. And so we're having to step really kind of like on the clouds, where it feels like there's no footing beneath our feet. But actually, as you step, like the stone appears, right? It's like as if you're walking across a pond and you think you're going to fall into the water and drown. But as you place your foot, another stone happens there. And then another stone pops up and another stone pops up, and you make your way across the water. So a time of radical trust and radical faith, a time of not eliminating parts of your humanity, but really truly embracing them. Learning to utilize them in constructive, quote unquote, positive ways. I don't like the label, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say here. And then trusting that life is happening for us, not to us, not against us. And if we're hitting a wall, maybe we're being asked to redirect. And if it isn't clear yet, just trust. Try to get out of your own way. But in order to get out of your own way, you have to acknowledge, allow, and accept and love and embrace where you currently are. Stop being so hard on yourself. Stop trying to make things happen too much. Come back into your center. Do the things where you can receive emotional, energetic, physical support. It's okay to not know. And you know what I've also learned about this process? You know what? Part of it, you're going to have anxiety. Part of it, you're going to get frustrated and angry and scared, and you're going to feel alone, and you're going to feel confused. Welcome to the journey. That's a part of it. Sometimes you're going to hear your intuition so clearly, and sometimes you're going to not know what the fuck it's saying. You're not going to hear it at all. It's all part of the journey, and it's all okay. You know, again, it goes back to this. We think that if it's hard that we're doing it wrong, we're going in the wrong direction. No, part of it is just that sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes it's going to take energy and effort. I often find that the fear is always in the anticipation, because whenever I'm actually in the doing of it, it's totally okay. I always have the anxiety of, like, oh my God, I have to move, I have to pack, I have to carry all of these bags down like 4 flights of stairs and then into this, and I have to bring my car down this tiny little alleyway into this old town. How am I going to do it? And where am I going to go? And it always is the anticipation. It's the hamster wheel in our head that creates anxiety and fear. And so now what I tell myself is, okay, I acknowledge I feel the anxiety now, I feel the fear now, and I know it's going to be okay. And in the moment, you know what? I've taken to the practice where I ask my angels for help. I do. And you know what? It's so beautiful, because then there's all these little mini miracles. Like my friend said, when you just let go and you have faith, you fall back into faith, all of these mini little miracles arise. And so I would ask for things. Oh, please, may I find a parking spot right in front of the door? And I did. Oh, please, may I have, this and the other. It's like all these little tiny requests. When I let go and came into faith, there were these little tiny miracles that would come through. And then what that did is it opened up so much gratitude, because all of a sudden it wasn't the gratitude that these things were happening, for me in really beautiful ways and it was making everything easeful, but the magic came back into my life. I'm not alone. I am supported. There are angels, there are guides, there is God, there is the universe, there is source, there is the creator, there are kind, beautiful people that are angels in human form. I am surrounded by love. I am surrounded by abundance. I am surrounded by opportunity and possibility. I am surrounded by beauty. And then that feeling of gratitude is so exquisite. And you know what? If you're in the state where you don't believe in anything and nothing's working out for you and you feel like shit and you can't even access gratitude, that's okay too. That's part of the journey too. And I've been there so many times, and you are going to come through it. You are going to come through it. And sometimes we just have to be brought to that point of letting go so that we get out of our own way, and then the magic comes in. We are shifting paradigms. We are shifting ways of being. Our entire makeup of who we are is shifting. We're not going to know how to do it all the time. That's okay. Keep bringing yourself into the present moment. Keep tuning into what do you need. Take care of yourself. Ask for help. I know I'm repeating myself over these weeks, but it's because I know that it's not just my personal journey. I know we're going through this collectively, and sometimes we just need to be reminded again and again and again. Somebody was saying you need to hear something 7 times before you get it. I don't know if that's true or not. But so if I repeat myself, it's because it's being repeated for me too, for me to really get it. And I'm going to leave you with something that my client said this morning. She reminded me of that she had heard at some kind of motivational workshop, is the hardest thing you will ever do in your life that will take the most amount of attempts, which is 600 attempts, is learning how to walk when you're a baby. Normally we give up so quickly. We will try something twice, 3 times, 4 times, maximum 5 times, and then we give up. 600 times. And when she told me that, I was like, oh yeah, it's like, because you're going to be determined to walk. You're not going to give up and just sit your whole life or crawl. You're going to walk. And I could see the persistence that a child has. My God, the determination, the tenacity, the stamina. And as we get older, we get a little bit jaded, and so we give up a little bit sooner. So the point is, don't give up. Sometimes it takes effort, but it will happen. It will happen. You're going to be led to where you need to be. So the invitation for today is to come into a place of much more kindness and compassion and love for all parts of who you are, and coming into a very different state of being. Try to experience the present moment and not project into the future. Try not to try. It sounds really weird, I know. It's a complete oxymoron. And see what is faith for you. I'm not talking about religious faith. I said that last week. What is faith for you? What is inclusion for you, so that you're not battling between different parts of yourself, your ego and your soul? How to utilize the things that you might not like that you're aware of, and what are the choices that you make to evolve that behavior? We're putting this all under the umbrella of awareness. But we're learning to be far more kind to ourselves. We're learning to include all parts of ourselves. We're learning to be whole again. We're learning that you are already complete. It actually was Zach Bush that was saying one of the most beautiful things he's ever experienced is when he's seen people that basically died for a moment and he resuscitated them. He's a doctor. And they came back to life and they opened their eyes. He said he's never seen anything that looks more complete than the eyes of someone that has just died and come back. Because they know it. They know in that moment that I am complete. I am whole. I am worthy. I am lovable. I am significant. I matter. I am special. I am supported. I am held. I am connected. I am divine source itself. And you see that in babies, right? So we're just going home, folks. We're just going home to who we already truly are. We've just had thousands of years of being taught to forget. We're remembering, and we're all walking each other back home, as Ram Dass said. So with that, I will leave you, and as always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.